Yeah, I will get things going. Welcome to the kickoff of our fall virtual access series. This one is focused on the future of hospitality in downtown Seattle. We have a great lineup of panelists with us this morning. Just a few quick items from me before we get started. We are holding this event as a Zoom webinar, which means we cannot see or hear you. Hopefully you can see and hear us well. We will have the opportunity to take questions from the audience this morning. There's multiple ways you can do that. You can submit your question in the Q&A feature at any time or via the chat. We will be looking at both of those. Or towards the end of the discussion, we do also welcome live questions. If you're willing to pose it live, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce our presenting sponsor, Megan Owlette with Alaska Airlines. Megan.
Thank you, Emily. Well, we are proud at Alaska to be a part of this fall three-part series that Emily mentioned. Today's topic being the future of hospitality and tourism in downtown Seattle, which we all know is critical to the vitality of our great city. I think this summer we all felt really good. There was a return of leisure travel. It brought energy back to downtown Seattle, something we all really wanted to see. And then we also all know that the Delta variant poses new challenges and puts a little bit of a damper on that, to put it mildly. But we also see some hopeful signs on the horizon with, for example, the reopening of some really important international markets starting this fall. So that's something that's good to see. The travel and hospitality industries are, of course, hallmarks of our hometown. And we at Alaska take great pride in bringing people from all over to experience everything Seattle has to offer. But we know there are lots of challenges to discuss today. And with that, let's turn it over to our smart host and panelists here today to lead today's conversation on the future of these critical sectors is producer, host, and historian for Cairo Radio, Feliks Banel. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan Owlette. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for our DSA Virtual Access event focused on hospitality and tourism. And thanks to DSA for organizing the series and to Alaska Airlines, the newest member of One World Alliance, for their support. Personally, I'm a big fan of the signature fruit and cheese platter. I've had 4 of them in the past 19 days, but who's counting? All right. I also want to thank and introduce the distinguished panelists who are taking part in the conversation this morning. We have Sonny Joseph. He's a general manager of the Fairmount Olympic Hotel. He's been with Fairmount for nearly 20 years and came to Seattle last November after earlier stops in Canada, Australia, Dubai, and Qatar. At the Fairmount Seattle, Sonny is helping oversee the grand restoration of that fabulous downtown hotel. Tom Norwalk has been president and CEO for 13 years for Visit Seattle. That's the private nonprofit organization that promotes the city as a destination for international and domestic leisure travel, meetings, and conventions. Excuse me. Tom is responsible for all of Visit Seattle's operations, sales and marketing, finance and budget management, and business development. Eric Tanaka is executive chef and managing partner of Tom Douglas Restaurants. Eric started as a cook at Dahlia Lounge nearly 30 years ago, then rose to executive chef before being named managing partner. Eric has opened multiple restaurants and played a crucial role in company operations, community relations, and new projects. All right. Now, we do have some questions we prepared in advance, and that will be the bulk of the conversation first thing. And we will get to audience questions in that last portion of the program, for which you can raise your hand. I do want to encourage everyone to use the Q&A or the chat function to pose questions at any time during the conversation. We monitor those and we get some great questions that way, and I'll keep an eye out on those, and I'll bring forward what I can. First, I just want to mention a few facts and figures recently gathered about what's been going on in hospitality and tourism in the Seattle area. Just kind of run through these sort of quickly as a starting point to whet our appetites. And we will be focused a lot on the future this morning, of course. All right, the August 2021 occupancy rate of 60% represents a trend upward since the start of the year. Still slower than August 2019, but a significant improvement over the August 2020 rate of 18%. Yeah, 60 is a lot better than 18. That's great. Hospitality-related foot traffic. Tourism-related visits by domestic visitors is now at 79% of 2019 levels and has been trending up in the recent months. Remember that the lowest point in April 2020, it was at 2%. So that's a huge increase. Local tourism, its visits of those with home addresses between 50 and 150 miles of downtown, is at 104% of 2019 levels. And while national domestic tourism, Those for more than 150 miles is at 76%. On the dining foot traffic recovery front, dining foot traffic has recovered to 60% of 2019 levels. This has been rising steadily since the start of the year, but dipped 4 percentage points in August 2021, most likely reflecting the Delta variant and other restrictions that have been put in place in the last month or so. About convention center impacts, a total of 83 citywide conventions previously booked at the Washington State Convention Center, representing $587 million in lost economic impact, were canceled due to COVID-19 or related restrictions, but 23 of these conventions have rebooked for future dates. All right, so just a few facts and figures to chew on there. Based on where we are, it's I think the second full day of autumn, or maybe the first full day of autumn today. We're coming out of a pretty busy summer tourism season. And what can we take away from the leisure travel uptick, or in terms of impacts to restaurants, hotel, and cultural attractions? Who wants to go first? Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Felix. Love to. I think what we've seen is the incredible pent-up demand of travel broadly around the region. Our good numbers started to improve May of this year as things started to come together, and we had an incredibly busy summer comparatively, as you mentioned, from a year ago, and still quite a ways off from where we would typically be in the high 80%, low 90% range of almost every summer I can remember over the last 15 years. So we saw the people want to travel. People are planning to travel. And given the navigation around vaccines, given now mask requirements and knowing what's open, what's closed, all of that, I think travelers are getting their hands on and learning about that. And so we've seen some great numbers. And I think I would just say it's a great forward-looking, optimistic point of view I've got of what's going to happen in the next couple of years.
All right. What about you, Eric? What about with Tom Douglas Restaurants and the restaurant industry that you've heard about?
I think from what we see downtown, there definitely is that, look at that 104% of local tourism. We've definitely seen that. I think that is the backbone of our customer base right now. And, it is strong. I think it is one of those pieces, I think, that we're developing, how do we get locals back? When do we see the local businesses come back to work and to really augment the strength of downtown? And I think create that positivity and energy that we know exists and everybody wants to have. But we are really thankful for that, the local tourism. Washington's a beautiful state. We're part of it. So we're, happy to see that. So we've definitely seen some positivity in that field.
Okay. Sonny, how about with the hotel industry?
It's to be honest, it was kind of a whirlwind for us. Starting April onwards, we never expected how this is going to come up so fast. And come June, we were thinking, oh my God, things are back to normal, because the sad part of it, there's enough demand, there was enough business, but we just couldn't cater to it. I had till recently, we had put a ceiling on occupancy levels. We couldn't operate many of the food and beverage operations. We'll talk lately about, the challenges, what we come across in terms of staffing. But it was, as Eric mentioned, it was predominantly driven by the backyard markets, which is basically the tire traffic, and guests who are coming here for 1 or 2 days and just to relax and wind down after that isolation period in their houses. So it was a perfect getaway. So we definitely, it was a sudden turn, and which is all great for the business, So it is definitely, we were in the right direction.
Given that closer to home business seems to be the strongest of the two, and probably will be for the foreseeable future, are there secret tips within the industry, or just things that businesses could be doing to try to take advantage of that, or reach those people or connect with them, since it's probably more valuable than connecting with a farther away audience, right, in the near term immediate future?
You very good question. And the thing is this, it's I think there is a lot of empathy required. Having said that, empathy not only from the hotel side, the guests are very empathetic as well. We have cut down our services drastically. Now we are slowly bringing it back. To be honest, our guest satisfaction scores are over the roof. despite of not having all the facilities open, but displaying that empathy, talking to them and having an open communication, the hotel, coming to the city, everything is safe and secure. So we as a brand, we did, I'm sure every other brand did the same. So many activation points in terms of marketing related around all safe. Basically, when you come here, there's an assurance that we are following these safe practices to ensure that everyone who is staying here will, we will minimize these impacts of spreading COVID.
Hey, Feliks, most of our advertising and marketing campaigns over the last 6 to 8 months, which are certainly have been scaled back, have really been targeted kind of here in our own backyard. And I think we're trying to appeal to responsible travelers that are following the rules and want to be safe and want that safety when they travel. And that's been a great way to drive more business to neighborhoods and small business owners. And I think that's what we've been seeing, and that will continue. I think it's a big part of our campaigns.
Yeah, I try to stay away from history because otherwise I'm usually obsessed with it. It reminds me a little bit of, I don't know, maybe 40, 45 years ago, before Seattle and King County were really targeting specific tourism markets, where it was more about, here's the Space Needle, here's Mount Rainier. And maybe that's enough given the pent up demand, given what people have been unable to experience for the last, 18 months.
Well, that's a good point, because I think we can't just rely on that, obviously. And as every other city also opens up and starts to market and attract visitors, we've got to be aggressive, and we've got to be really promoting what we love and enjoy about this region. And you're right, we can't just sit back and think that that's going to happen, that our summers, I believe, are no longer going to be automatic. We're going to have to work a little harder, I think, to make sure we're competing, certainly up and down the West Coast.
And in terms of, again, the short term again, do you foresee, as events start to come back and the holiday season is ahead? I mean, I know a lot of people travel to Seattle from around the region to take advantage of holiday shopping and that sort of thing. What's the forecast right now for how the holidays might look? Anybody?
Go ahead, Eric, you want to jump in?
Yeah, we are in the Hotel Andra, one of our restaurants, Lola, and we also have a catering facility that we are no longer, going with. But at this point, we're seeing the holiday business. It's a lot smaller groups. If it formerly a party was 20 to 30, now there's 7 to 12 people in. So it's I think there's the demand, but it has changed. It is smaller groups, certainly less business team building and more social. Local is what we're seeing predominantly at this point. So we're happy to see that it's there, but we'd like to see some of that other side come back as well.
It's the same in the hotel. What we are seeing is this: we have some amazing meeting spaces, and these were the home for the galas for many years. And what's happening is this: they are scaling down this galas. Either they are completely moving into the next year. There's still the kind of a fear. I think the vaccination mandate, which is a whole different story, it is a plus and a minus, because there is within the group, there are people who are not vaccinated. So the organizer is completely canceling it or making it a smaller one. But having said that, the big groups are becoming smaller, or they are moving into the next year. And we are seeing that those inquiries and calls have started coming in. But what we have seen is a huge uptake in small weddings and small events happening, which are probably 150 to 50, 25, huge increase. And a lot of the destination weddings which got canceled because now they are scared to move away and go to another city or another state or another country, and they are having it here. And there is enough space and enough supply to cater to that. So we definitely, there are pros and cons attached to it, but luckily we are quite busy in the catering side to cater to these small events.
And I think Feliks is kind of what you asked before. How do you take advantage of the, what are the changes? And I think you have to be open-minded. Some of these groups in the past, you wouldn't really have entertained because you're trying to fill that room. If you're seating 250 in that room, you're going for the party that's 250. Now, a party of 75 doesn't look that bad. So I think it's keeping an open mind and really kind of trying to pivot to, okay, maybe we can do 275s in that room versus, one for 250. So, it's just kind of resetting your expectations on what you want to book and how you want to accomplish that business.
I think we'd also add just on some of the larger national meetings, Feliks, as you indicated, we've actually, sadly, we've lost about 90 conventions since the start of the pandemic, up from 83. And those are sprinkled predominantly through 2020 and 21. We still have 8 large conventions on the books here at the convention center, one in this week and another one next week. And so the real trick for us now is forecasting how many of those delegates and attendees will come, certainly different from what was booked multiple years ago. But what we're finding is that a lot of those groups are wanting to stay on the books, and we're finding that attendance certainly variable, but not as drastically bad as we might have forecasted 3 months ago. And long-term demand for the new Summit building, which is opening mid-year next year, is looking good for the future. So that gives us a lot of hope also in those large gatherings coming back, because I think we've learned that you can't really be as effective without that face-to-face component in business settings.
I want to ask Sunny and Eric about specifically about staffing issues, and about what they've done during the pandemic in terms of taking advantage of the slowdown to sort of do some capital improvements and things like that. But tell me about the Summit building, just for those who don't know.
The Summit is the new building that's under construction over on 9th and Pine Street. It's been broke ground in 2018, been under development really for probably 12 years, in the closest proximity that was really available next to the existing building here on Pike Street, which is really about 33 years old. So that building will be comparable in size to the existing building, although quite unique. We'll have 2 really well-sized convention centers about a block and a half apart, without any physical connection. So we're selling them either collectively together for many groups, or individually for different groups at the same time. And the great thing about that is the hotel inventory has grown substantially over the last 8 to 10 years. And so a lot of that new hotel inventory is in place. It's not like you have a center and then have to develop hotels around it. We've already got that there. The Hyatt Regency, which opened a couple of years ago, and certainly the Sheraton and their expansion back in 2007 and 8. So we are ready for that. And I think the demand is good. It will be, I think, one of the most talked about convention centers in the country for the next couple of years, because of how just really interesting it is architecturally. And it's going to be a beautiful addition to that part of downtown.
Yeah, it seems like really good timing too. And now, Sunny, I alluded to this in your introduction, but the renovation that's going on at Fairmount Olympic, is that something that was in the works before the pandemic, or was it sort of taking advantage of the downturn? Or tell me what you guys are planning right now.
No, it was in the works before the pandemic. It was a scheduled renovation. So what we did is we restored the whole lobby, and we introduced a new lobby bar in the middle of the lobby. And plus we have restored the old Georgian. It's going to be relaunched in the marketplace with a very new concept. And we have a new kind of a hidden bar as well. So everything is done. To be honest, now the lobby bar is up and running, and everything is running well in the lobby area. The restaurant, we are almost 90% done. The travel restrictions, ease of travel restriction will help us to get to the finish line, because this whole place was designed by designers from Spain. They had huge difficulty. The artists and the designers had difficulty to come to the country. Hopefully, starting November, they will be able to come, because we still need to put some final touches to the restaurant and bar. So very soon we will be able to announce an opening date for that. So super excited about it. I think $25 million was very well spent. At least that's what the guests are telling us. Super impressed.
And Eric, you've had made some similar shifts and changes at Tom Douglas.
Yeah, we were not pre-scheduled. I think, as we've pivoted through this, our Dahlia Bakery, it was kind of a jewel box. It was in, 400 square feet. We kind of tripled that space and kind of took into account social distancing, flow, and just trying to keep in mind that this, COVID's not going away, that we need to really kind of plan around that. And then some of the other pieces, we've moved our Serious Pie that was formerly around the corner into our Dahlia Lounge space. So, 32 years that was open, and sadly we did close. But I think in this hiring environment, and as you asked before, what are you doing? Really, a lot of our concepts are planned around having less labor because it's just not there. You can be hopeful, and we're getting a lot of people that are returning. But still, with this, new era kind of in restaurateuring and being downtown, it's just thinking through how do you maintain the quality and level of service that you want to have. And, Sunny said earlier that they capped, the reservations. We've done the same thing. We've gone to, we used to be open 7 days, breakfast, lunch, dinner. We've gone to 5 days and, just open breakfast and lunch. And, you're just capping, where you do your business. And a lot of it is based around your staffing or, conceptually, what you're really going after, and kind of focusing, your efforts in those categories.
Yeah, and I know in any time, whether, pandemic or not, retention of good staff and recruiting new staff is always, I don't know, probably the number one for businesses where your staff is dealing directly with the public face to face. Have either of you done, taking special measures to help? I don't know. I imagine your long-term staff are probably feeling pretty fried. Have you done special things to kind of try to retain people, and special things to recruit new people? I know that's a huge challenge right now all across the industry.
Feliks, you are absolutely right. Means we are very lucky that we've been around for a long time, and we have a very good solid base of staff who have been here for many years. So there is so much of strong emotional attachment and loyalty attached. So they were the first to return back. But the colleagues who had less tenure, it just moved away. Where, as I mentioned to you earlier, come April, when we opened the doors fully and we said we are, we have a bar and everything is ready to go, we were counting on our furloughed colleagues to come back, and they didn't show up. Probably around 60% of them, they didn't just refuse to come back. And to your point about what we are doing, recognizing and really working with them and having an open communication with them is saying that we are trying hard. We created a lot of, I'm sure everyone in the industry did the same. We have a signing bonus for new colleagues, a referral program, which is basically telling our colleagues to go and refer a friend or someone whom they know, and there is a certain amount, a certain dollar amount given to them, and just recognizing them, making sure that the services which we had cut down during the height of pandemic, when we were 2%, 5% occupancy, we are bringing it back, namely the staff cafeteria, and doing the temperature check with them. We are in a much better position right now, but we are far off from where we have to be. So it is a challenge, and that is something which I was discussing with Tom the other day, that this is it's a national problem. Staffing the hospitality industry, especially in a couple of areas, which is culinary. I'm sure Chef Eric is going to agree with me. And the other one is the housekeeping. So it looks like suddenly they have just disappeared, and we have to do something to bring this workforce back to the workplace.
Tom, excuse me, Eric.
We've pretty much mimicked, what Sunny has been saying, the referral bonus, hiring bonuses. We are also paying hero pay, another $4 an hour on top of their regular wage. And we've been hosting a lot of just internal restaurant meetings and talking about how people are feeling and really giving them options to discuss that, whether that's with a third party, with their manager, and really trying to get to some mental health pieces for everybody, our managers and hourly staff as well, because it has been stressful. I think just when you think something's happening, and just like Sunny in that June period, business really took off, and we were all flying high, and then the Delta piece came, and then you're back down, and but as you try and move your way through mask, no mask, vaccination, proof of vaccination, it's really hard for the staff to wrap their head around each change, and just the managers trying to wrap their head about the training and those pieces. So it has been stressful, and we've really been trying to really monitor and address those pieces as they come up. And I think that's been the most successful thing, I think, as far as retention and morale.
And I imagine it's pretty tricky knowing when to curtail the signing bonus or the retention bonus or that sort of a program, because I imagine, that doesn't obviously takes away from the bottom line. It increases your gross expenses. There was I don't know if you guys saw, there's a New York Times article last week or a few days ago about how some restaurants in the Northeast have used the pandemic to completely shift their business model away from tipping to a service charge. And they're seeing, slightly higher profits, and they're seeing with the goal being of retaining good staff. Are there sort of long-term changes that are going to stick with us beyond the end of the pandemic, which we hope is not too far in the future? Any three of you? Any of you three?
I can jump in, Felix. I mean, so as we are preparing to open up our key flagship restaurant, some of the discussions, and one of the biggest effort for us as a restaurant inside the hotel is to position this as a freestanding restaurant, and every effort is being made to answer your question in order to motivate the culinary team and the stewarding team, which we have never done before, is something which freestanding restaurants have done for a long time, is to introduce a service charge just for the team who is at the back of the house, so that there is a motivation. The service staff, they are taken care of. How do we ensure that they are taken care of? It's going to be a nominal service charge, and we'll be very open about it, clear disclaimer where it's going to go. I think means we are still, wages, we pay premium wages, but over and above, just to give that extra boost and motivation, I think, and those kind of initiatives, I personally think is going to be here for long, and it's here to stay.
I would agree with Sunny. We were actually service charge prior to the pandemic, but I think there is a lot of pushback. People don't quite understand, how it works. Post-pandemic, or right now, we've gone back to tip sharing, but and more, as Sunny has said, we've really evened it out between the front and the back of the house. So it's really kind of across the board. Everybody's working and pulling for the same goals and objectives. We see less, division between the front and the back of the house that way. So you're one team. And I think that is something that I'm seeing around the city with other restaurants as well. And I think another big thing is just kind of the technology that is out there to kind of help expedite certain pieces of the business. And I think those pieces are being input right now and are going to be permanent throughout our industry moving forward.
Okay. And, a few of you've mentioned vaccination requirements and social distancing and some of the other things we've all been struggling to understand as they've changed over the last 18 months. Tom, when people are booking in events 3, 6, 8 months in advance, are they asking questions about that? And how are you explaining what might be ahead when nobody really has a crystal ball?
Yeah, it's been probably one of the most challenging things that our sales and services team has had to do with these groups that have literally been on our books for anywhere from 4 to maybe 10 years in some cases. What's going to happen? And they're all on timeframes where they've got to make some business decisions. Do they come to Seattle or not? Can they afford to operate a smaller meeting that might have to be socially distanced or whatever the requirement might be? We've tried to just be a transparent and quick to market update on what are the regulations, restrictions happening almost in real time, alerting every one of those customers and or our hotel partners, our hoteliers and our restaurateurs about where we can get a quick answer, because I think that's been a big challenge. What we're finding is that customers want an answer. They know they've got to make that decision. And in some cases, we found that even attendance might increase if vaccines are required, because the individual might have that decision-making capability to say, I want to come and I'm feeling safer about going to a large gathering in Seattle than I might, let's say, in Texas or somewhere else. So it goes both ways, but I think it's the uncertainty of those restrictions which has really been very challenging, because ultimately a group might just say it's easier just to postpone a year, go totally virtual, and then come back to it in future years. And as I said earlier, Felix, we're somewhat excited that in most cases, many of these big groups want to come back and be together.
And in conventions in general, what are the other concerns you're hearing from potential convention visitors? And are any cities in the U.S. performing really well right now?
Well, there are certainly cities in the U.S. performing really strong, and some of those are in the Sun Belt. Some are in somewhat more relaxed states. If you look at Florida, again, look at Texas, look at parts of Arizona that have the seasonality in their favor at certain times of the year and have large facilities, and they've done quite well, I think, through the pandemic. Convention planners, though, want more than just a large building, a wonderful building. They want that destination. They want that experience on the streets. They want restaurants. They want arts and culture, and they really want it to be more than just what happens in the business event confines. So, yeah, we hear that all the time, and we're hosting over the last several months more clients on a weekly basis that are looking at our city, shopping our city compared to other destinations. We're hosting journalists that come in as we're trying to plant and talk about the good news of all these great things happening here. And yeah, there are concerns they've got on, are we going to be open? Are we reopening? How fast? And is it going to be a great experience?
And one of the things that was a huge concern in downtown Seattle prior to the pandemic and even early in the pandemic, and occasionally still now, is public safety. I mean, it was the number one story prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. What are you hearing about public safety from your customers or potential customers?
I think right now, and I don't think it's surprising for those of us living and working here that are in and out of downtown a lot, it does feel like the city's making some improvements in terms of what we would call the street scene. And that's looking at compassionate solutions to folks that are on the streets or making sure that the city's clean and feeling good. It is probably our biggest issue, the perceived concern about safety, which is not always true, or the reality of safety of what people experience or see when they're here on the streets in our neighborhoods. And it's much more than, as you know, just the downtown core. It's our neighborhoods from Soto to Pioneer Square to Ballard to University District. And so it continues to be a major issue. And I think of people making a decision to travel, especially in the leisure business segment, where they have totally control on where they go and when they go. Safety is always at the top of the list, I think, and especially from an international perspective, as those markets start to reopen in this next year. Safety and security and the reputation of a city are huge in the planning standpoint. So we know we've got work to do in the city, but I would say what we've felt the last several months is that things are feeling a little bit better.
I can completely agree with you, Tom. And just to add on to the point, we had meeting planners comment about that, in the change in their perception about Seattle. It looks different. And then they are comparing it with other cities, which have much bigger problems than us, but it is never magnified the way Seattle was magnified. So I think it is still there, and we cannot deny that. But the reality is this, improvements are happening, and we can see that. Our guests can feel that when they walk around in the city, when they go down to the Pike Market. Nobody comes and complains to us, oh my God, they were feeling threatened or they were feeling uncomfortable. But they said, yeah, it looks like you guys have an issue. I mean, it's like any other city. But the tone is different than what it was 8 months, 7 months back.
Sonny, I'm going to start sending you the letters I'm getting then.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
No, I would say, Feliks, not to diminish the big issue we've got, because it's a huge issue, and probably more so in this last year and a half than we've ever thought would become an issue. But I mean, I personally have a tough time when I walk from our convention center neighborhood down Pike and I cross through 3rd and Pike, which has always been kind of that corner of just a little bit of chaos and concern. And it's very hard to do that. And I think when you look at the work we've got ahead, not only from our elected officials and the business community and everybody else, we need to continue to push and do the right things. And so it's a big issue.
Yeah, I would say downtown, I think it is more neighborhood, really street to street, the activity. I think setting up by the Fairmount or, more by the convention center, I think you might be a little bit more segmented off, but, we're on 4th and we're down at the market right off Lenore in Virginia. We are seeing increased incidents, and it's really daily now. We are, forming a block watch with some of the other businesses on our street. And we are working with, the West Precinct to do some de-escalation training. So it's really, we're trying to, form a public-private kind of engagement piece because it takes constant vigilance in our area. And there are definitely areas that, and really just 2 streets up, over by the Spheres, it's beautiful. But I think as you start to move down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it gets a little bit hairier, and it's it is certainly less safe. So I think, we can't look for any immediate answers. And I think the approach that we're taking is that we have to be engaged in our own safety. And, I think you'd hope to not always have to do that. And there's certainly limits to that. We don't want to put our employees in harm's way, but they are certainly voicing that this is a stressful piece to them when we have multiple people coming in and not in the right frame of mind and not customers, and harassing people. So it is a real and constant piece that I know, Tom, that you guys are focused on it. I know that West Precinct is focused on it, and we're just gonna have to keep plugging away, but we can't make it go away without a concerted effort on multiple fronts.
Yeah, and your customers are dealing with it when they come to give you their business, but your employees are dealing with it every day. Have you noticed any reluctance or employees changing their behavior or doing things different because of their perceptions about public safety?
They are, and I think that's why we did get involved with the community support officer over at the West Precinct. They want more training on how to handle, how to de-escalate, what's appropriate. But in the same point, being compassionate, these people need help. So it's, that balance of humanity and policing, and it's a big issue in the world. So it's not just us, but we are confronted with it, and we want to be able to handle those situations, but also be able to be free to do our business and have a good environment for everybody that's downtown.
I think it's one of those things, Felix, I'm sorry to interrupt, that ultimately on how strong we recover over the next several years will hinge on that very issue of downtown, because that's been what we sell around the world, is our walkability and our uniqueness. And we love to say we are a little gritty, which Tom Douglas says all the time, but
as little gritty as possible.
Yeah, but safety is an issue.
Yeah. Got a question from the audience I want to go to from the Q&A. What does the cruise business look like going forward? Do you anticipate continued strength in the Alaska market? That's a question for you, Tom.
Yeah, well, I would say our Port of Seattle colleagues and the cruise companies that serve Seattle are having, I think, a very good modified season this year. We're very fortunate that the business came back at a lower level, obviously, than we had hoped, given all the restrictions and ramifications of border closings. I think the cruise lines have been very surprised in a way, but happy on how it's turned out this year. The last sailing is, I think, the 2nd or 3rd week in October, so it seems to be a little bit of a longer season. And what we're hearing from our colleagues at the port and from some of the customers is they're anticipating probably 2022 being just one of the best years ever. And that's kind of back to where we were in 19, where we were having record after record of number of sailings and passengers coming through the city. And I think that's a great thing. And I don't think, I've mentioned before, that the summers were always so busy that in some cases cruise might have been taken for granted a little bit on how valuable that is to this region. And I don't think that'll ever happen again, because we need every one of those guests coming in.
Yeah, and obviously that impacts hotels and restaurants immensely when you have one of those ships pulled up in front there.
Absolutely. Just to add on to that, Felix, and just because it's a good story to talk about. So we have never seen multiple year requests coming through these big cruise lines, and actually they are knocking at the door to seal the deal for a couple of years for the next following years. So that means there is an increased confidence in their level, and their confidence is not just coming like this. It looks like to Tom's point, there is definitely, it's going to be great couple of years, at least minimum, to see that, especially when things are coming out of the pandemic. I think everybody wants a break, and they are forecasting it, and they are approaching us.
You know, and Tom, you mentioned some of the border issues with Canada, and I know that travel from Canada is a huge impact in the Northwest, and not just when the Blue Jays are playing the Mariners or when the Kraken will be playing the Canucks, but it feels like somebody at the federal level seems to be a disconnect between understanding how much that border closure continues to impact. I mean, not just Point Roberts, which is a whole different story, but the tourism business here between British Columbia and Washington State. Is there anything we can do as an industry or as a community to better connect with the federal people who can make that border opening happen?
Well, I think our legislative elected officials are really on that and are pushing hard. And I know that just this week, with good news about the European Union maybe opening up on visitations in, and the UK happening in November at some point, that will probably lend itself to the Canadian border as well, doing the same thing. But our congressional delegation has been all over that, pushing hard for the administration that it really should be a two-way street, and not just allowing Americans to go north, but it should be both ways. And the Canadian market for us as a city and a region is at its height would be about 2 million visitors a year coming across the border. And I think that that's what we will get back to. That is a market, if you talk about pent up demand, is going to be wonderful for us in time. And if it's in time for maybe holidays, which would be wonderful, certainly it's going to be a big factor for next year. But it's not just our Washington State border. If you look all across the country in some of the major border crossings, the same argument and frustrations being voiced. It's just not an equitable situation the way it is. And quite honestly, it's a little bit mind-boggling, because you look at where Canada has come on vaccinations, and you look at parts of Europe where they've come, and we've struggled a bit, we've stalled a bit, certainly not in this part of the country, but it just does not really make sense. So we're pushing hard through our colleagues at the U.S. Travel Association that are constantly promoting and in touch with the administration about that. But I think that will come soon, but it probably could have happened earlier and should have.
Yeah. And in terms of other government at other levels, we've talked a little bit about public safety, and the West Precinct was mentioned, and we'll have a new mayor come January. In terms of the city level, the county level, the state level, is there more that those levels of government can do to help hospitality and tourism in Washington or Seattle or King County? Are there better coordination or things that can be done to make it easier for people in this industry to be successful?
That's a good question, Felix. That's a tough question. I mean, I think we're so fortunate in this area. If you look at just at the Port of Seattle, and you look at the commission at the port, you look at the economic development that they continue to bring top of mind to this region, from the airport and the international arrivals facility, which is just really a couple of months away, cruise, every piece of what they're doing has really helped propel this region in a big way. And I think the county, in a similar way, was the first to jump in with some CARES funding last year for tourism promotion, again, to promote locally and safely, and totally get that. And so I think we could probably all have better coordination, I think, with the city. We have a tourism improvement area, which is the hoteliers agree to assess a small, modest amount for marketing dollars to hotel guests that stay there. And we'll probably be starting that process to talk with our city council members soon about it. Requires just the approval of hotels, of course, but the approval of the council to say, let's take that up a bit and let's have more money to promote this region, which means we're promoting and trying to get more jobs and more tax generation. So there always could be better coordination at that level, I think.
But Sunny or Eric, you guys, what do you want from the city, from the county, from the state to make your lives easier for your business?
I would agree with Tom. I don't know if there's a simple
Wow.
answer to that. I think, I think collaborative planning, because I do feel the funding is there. You could always use more funding, but I think, between, once again, I think you look public-private, non-profs, there are a lot of people in this space, either providing support or, policing in that sense. but they need to be coordinated for this to work. Housing needs to happen. You know, it's so circular and so complex. It's not one agency. It's not one nonprofit. It's not, you know, it's not one level of government. It is really all of them focused together. And that takes, you know, an immense amount of leadership and probably political will, you know, all across the board. And I think it is difficult. It is really for us our single largest want, but you know, I do understand and see the complexity to these issues.
Mhm.
For me, it's a big loaded question, but I'll answer it. I think, you know, we had challenges with regards to certain talents in terms of working before the pandemic, and it continues. It has just heightened during the pandemic. And I think we need systematic immigration reforms at the national level to bring those. We are much more in Seattle. We are much more than IT and all the tech startup companies here. Hospitality is a big thing, and we need support. At the end of the day, I think there are many other countries where we can learn from, but we need to bring those talents, especially culinary, which is going to be an issue. It's going to be very soon. If we don't do those reforms, we will have probably robots working in the kitchen.
All right, I got a question, audience question in the Q&A, and if there's other audience members who have questions, feel free to type those in. This is about the, let's see. Oh, actually, first, let's this political will that you mentioned, Eric. Is the political will there? Can any of you speak to the political will necessary to address these things that we're talking about here?
I do think the political will is there. It just might be a little bit divided. I think, you know, if anybody had the answer, we'd be going on it. But there's more to it than you know it all. Like obviously, it's a huge question. There's so many pieces wrapped up in this. You know, social services, housing, fair wages. You know, that political piece in there is all over the place. I think finding that blend of public and private will is you know has to happen, and you know how do you tie all that together to meet those needs. I think the pandemic might have just exacerbated all of this, but you know this was bubbling up prior. This is not a new issue, and as really Tom said, we've been known as a gritty city. You know, I've lived in LA, I've lived in Manhattan, and those are same things. It's not unique or to us. But you know, hopefully we can come up with a unique solution, because I think it's going to take something like that somebody is really going to have to stake their claim and get all of these agencies, governmental, you know, pieces pulling together.
Wait, who's that somebody?
You know, hopefully it's our next mayor.
It's the question we get asked probably the most, Feliks, from either disgruntled visitors or concerned customers after they visit Seattle or are thinking of coming, is how could a city this creative and with some of the wealth that we have and some of that pioneering spirit not have figured this out much sooner? And I think it's a tough one to answer, as we're all here trying to answer the question. It's very tough, and it's fractionalized, I think, sadly, and so it's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Pollyanna by nature, and I do think there will be silver linings that will emerge from this period. And my hope is that a new sense of leadership and of sort of pragmatism around the stuff that really needs to be there for the city to function, for the people who live here and for the people who we want to visit. That's my hope for the future. Not that we don't have it now, but let's come more to specific questions here. Or Sunny, do you have anything you want to add from that, or did you have anything more to that, the political will question?
No. I'm good.
Okay. Specific question about the 2023 All-Star Baseball game coming to Seattle. Will the restaurant and hospitality industry be able to accommodate the tremendous influx of people in light of the staffing challenges and general support space? Is a year and a half enough time to plan?
Yes, it is a relatively short time frame compared to how these tournaments or all-star games are awarded or any major sport event. But yeah, we've got time to plan. And I think all of the development work that's been taking place over the last several years and over the next couple of years play in our favor, from the waterfront to the summit building to everything happening. So we will be ready. And I think 2023, July of 2023 will be, ironically now, I would not have said this a year ago, but that's probably just when we're getting into really recovery as a region.
Wow.
As we know it. So I would have said we would be well past that window a year ago, but now I'm saying that's going to be the time frame. So we'll be ready. I think the city's going to shine with everything happening in July of 23.
Excellent. All right, here's a question about debt. Hotels and restaurants have largely survived through stimulus programs that bolster their debt and costs. Where do you see this going through the winter? Is the market recovering quickly enough to enable hospitality to service their debt, or are bankruptcies on the horizon? Great question. Who wants to take that?
I'll jump in there.
Who has the political will to take that?
But I could, I mean, again, it will probably a very isolated answer to a very broader question. I think we are on the right track. We are on the right track, and we are all optimistic about it, unless and until we do. Obviously, we all agree pendulum can swing in any direction, but we are very optimistic with everything going around. I think this whole pandemic situation, I don't know whether you read in the morning news in the BBC today, it says in UK, come July, COVID will be just treated like a normal cold flu. That's the mindset. I think psychologically, when it gets into the minds of many of our consumers and everybody around, this is not going to stay forever. So we are optimistic, and things are going to improve, even from the cash flow perspective, and we are going to move away. As I said, again, talking just about myself, our business, we are in the right track.
I would mimic some of those pieces. I think, from the restaurant perspective, restaurants are pretty gritty, entrepreneurial. I think you'll see some pivots. It's not going to be the same as it was before. But restaurants find a way. It's kind of a building block and a starting point for many people. And whether it's a food cart, a food truck, a standalone business, restaurants find their way. And I think that, we hold true to that. And that's our belief. Businesses will go out. We've had businesses go out. So I'm not going to say that there aren't and won't, but I think the businesses that will move forward and the new businesses that come up are going to be built around, what our reality is in 2022, 2023, with subsidies or without, we're going to figure it out. It's not easy. It's taxing, but we have that desire and passion to keep it going. So
I read in the New York Times that some in Manhattan, for instance, with all the retail space, ground level retail space becoming available because of businesses, shutting down after, long, decades of being in business, or many years of being in business, that some big retailers are taking advantage of it. Some big restaurant chains are moving into Manhattan in ways they hadn't moved in the past or have never done in the past. In general, I think it's been, or is the recovery ahead? Is it easier or tougher? Is it easier for a small business versus like a national chain? Is there sort of advantages or disadvantages to being a small locally owned company versus being a big chain with a big footprint that's all over the country?
I think it goes both ways. From a large corporate restaurant perspective, I think you can capitalize those moves. But as a small restaurateur, I think that you can be nimbler and find solutions in a lot faster way. So I think for both, and once again, how industrious you are, whether you're small or large, knowing what you're good at or what capabilities you have, I think it's really going to be flexing on those exact positions. So there's certain things that small restaurants can't do because they can't capitalize the way a large corporation can. And there are certain things that, large corporations can't do because they can't turn on a dime like a small, independent restaurant can. So I think there's room for both to thrive, but it's just not going to be with the same models that we've seen in the past.
Sonny, what about from your perspective?
I fully agree. At the end of the day, we have the benefit of being the larger, part of the larger corporation. And it's all about leveraging the resources what we have and thinking out of the box, being innovative and thinking totally doing something. One thing is for sure, our business model, not necessarily from the way we service our guests, but the way we look at our business, the way we operate is going to change. And that has to change, because it is not sustainable the way we used to do it. And so something, innovation is going to help us, and it's going to be learning from each other as well, because there is a lot of learning what has happened, and a lot of good things have been put in practice in the midst of all the bad things during the past 18 months. People have reinvented themselves, and we are continuously being hungry and trying to learn from our neighbors, from our fellow hoteliers, and how we can do and put our best foot forward, because a lot of the challenges will remain, and means it's going to be a costly business. Our business is going to increase like every other, but for example, the supply chain is a huge issue, which it thinks the cost of produce is increasing. Other day, I got the cost of a pound of Dungeness crab in the city of Seattle, $51 a pound. And but there are consumers who are willing to pay. They understand they are not unreasonable, but we'll have to just rework some of those stuffs.
Well, we have just a few minutes left. If there's any audience member who wants to ask a question in person, you could use the raise your hand function. If there's any other audience members who wants to submit a question by Q&A or chat, now is a good time to do that. But in terms of stuff that we didn't cover or we didn't ask, is there anything sort of inspiring or optimistic? Tell me what you're most optimistic about for the next 3 to 6 months for tourism and hospitality in Seattle. Let's start with you, Tom.
I'm really excited and optimistic. I think we've got a number of those large projects that have been in progress in this city, in this region, for a number of years that are all going to be coming to fruition. I think any one of those projects, if it's a convention center, an airport expansion, if it's a cruise growth in cruise market or terminal, any city in the world would want one of those projects, and we've got several of those happening, not to mention Climate Pledge, which is just weeks away from changing the dynamic in Seattle. That's a huge game changer in so many ways, not only from a sports perspective, major events perspective for our ability to go out and bring other sports events here, but what it will do for music back in the city. And I think we will be celebrating that for a long time. So I am totally pumped about what can happen. And yet, I think I was going to say, back to your question, Feliks, about government synchronization of the services, we need to help small business, because ironically, the beneficiaries of tourism are mostly small businesses in neighborhoods. And that's what makes it attractive. That's what makes it unique and different. We've never been a cookie cutter city, and we'll probably never become one. And so I think that's why we need to be really championing small business and supporting them.
Very nice. Now, Sunny, about 20 seconds to tell me what you're most optimistic about.
My world is full of optimism, and especially for this hotel, the most optimistic thing which we are looking forward to is to reopening the 2 signature F&B venues, which is going to definitely make a mark in the city, and we are really working hard towards it. It is definitely going to, I think, help the city, help the community, and to make sure that most of the community can come over and visit us. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Very nice. Eric, I'll give you 15 seconds.
All right. I am most excited for our returning employees. It's like family coming back. So as we reopen a couple of our restaurants, we've had a lot of people wanting to come back. So I'm excited to see our family.
All right. Well, I want to thank our panelists, Sunny Joseph, Tom Norwalk, and Eric Tanaka. I want to thank everybody for joining us today for DSA Virtual Access. Thanks to John Scholes, James Cito, Emily Baylor, and Elliot Kravenko of DSA, and special thanks to Megan Owlette of Alaska Airlines. And please plan on joining us again on Thursday, October 21st. We'll be discussing the future of retail with a local broker, a national retail expert, and a downtown Seattle retailer. Mark your calendar for 9 a.m. on October 21st and watch your email inbox for more information in the weeks ahead. Until then, I'm Feliks Banel for DSA. Thanks for joining us this morning. Go Mariners, and we'll see you in downtown Seattle.
Thanks, Feliks.
Thank you.